Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Monday, June 17th, 2019. Yeah, it's definitely Monday for sure. Guys, we hope you had a wonderful Father's Day weekend. I know here at the Grand Solar Minimum channel, ours was a delight. I hope we spent it with family and friends. But let's get right into our Grand Solar Minimum news for the night. We got a couple things on tap. We'll start off with our solar wind speeds sitting at 321.5 kilometers per second with a density of 7.1. Now let's go ahead and go to SPACEWEATHER.com where we will check out our sun. Guess what? We're blank once again. 0 sunspots, 29 days in a row. We're at 103 days for 2019 without sunspots. That's 61%. Let's take a look at the TCI as well. Look at that. 3.54. Now that's dropping, and we are in the middle of June, and our TCI, Thermosphere Climate Index, the very upper part of our atmosphere, is still registering cold in the northern hemisphere as well. So interesting to see temperatures still dropping in the TCI index. Now let's go ahead to the grandsolarminimum.com at our space weather section and check out what we have in store as far as what's going on with our sun, and it's quiet. KP indices of 1, 24-hour max of 1. Right now we're sitting at 0. And there's our blank sun, and let's check out the SDO in motion. We do see another coronal hole that it looks to be Earth-facing, and unfortunately my SDO motion is not cooperating at this time. Let's try this one more time. No. So we do have a coronal hole that is Earth-facing right now, so give that a few days before we see the effects of that, probably somewhere around June 21st. See what SpaceWeather.com has to say about that. Yeah, between the 18th and the 19th. So we'll see solar wind speeds probably on the uptick, maybe some minor G1 activity possible, but that's about all that we're expecting. Now, let's check out the rest of our star and see what we can look at on the horizon here. Now, there is the active region that we continue to see that's reoccurring at the negative 180, right at the equatorial region. And we know that's still quite some time away from the eastern limb of our sun. So unless we see something develop in the near future, it's possible we could see sunspots not appear for at least another 15 days, at least. Nevertheless, we'll continue to monitor this here at the grandsolarminimum.com. And so let's get right into some world news right off the grip here. Violent hailstorms hit France. Catastrophic agricultural damage reported. Violent hailstorms swept through the southeastern France on June 15th and the 16th, causing significant infrastructural and agricultural damage. One person was killed in the town of Tangies, Haute-Savoie, department of Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region. Now, the storm brought winds excess of 62 miles per hour, heavy rain, and large hail, causing widespread and, in many cases, catastrophic damage. The epicenter of the sudden storm, which struck Saturday afternoon, June 15th, where it quickly transformed into raging rivers when the floodwaters did hit these areas. Farmers reported that hail the size of golf balls and up to tennis balls decimated their orchards and vineyards. In some cases, entire harvests were destroyed. A 51-year-old woman was killed in the town of Tangies. She was in a camper, and a tree had fallen on the camper. So many times where we hear reported deaths, it's usually because of a fallen tree on a camper, a house, or even a trailer. Thanks to the Watchers.news for collecting all of the information here. Several parts of the world we've seen these images where it looks like a monsoon. Here's some more action of the infrastructure failing, of the sudden flooding. Obviously, their infrastructure is not ready or able to handle the amount of rain that had fallen, along with that hailstorm that looked like it snowed. Look at this. And of course, this was the latter part of the flooding. See some hail mixed in with that as well. Again, we want to thank the Watchers.news for all their footage and all their work putting this all together for us so we could get the entire story and see for ourselves what we were being reported here with the rain and the hail and the flooding. Moving on to our next story here, third earthquake registered under Lake Erie, Ohio. Now, there was a paper that came out a few years ago that speculated that there is possible fracking in the area that is causing the earthquakes in this region. Now, I'm from Ohio, lived there all my life. I've been away for now 3 years, and in my entire life, I've never even heard of earthquakes, maybe once or twice that happened in Ohio. We're talking a minor 3.0 or lower. So until this year, I wasn't even aware that we had earthquakes rarely here and there. But the paper suggests that the fracking causes these minor earthquakes, and I'll give you that on a 1.5 or 1.7. But on a 4.0, I'm not so sure if fracking is capable of producing these quakes. And just in 7 days, we've had 3 earthquakes. Now, this last one was 1.5. Actually, that was on June 17th, making it the third one. But there was also, the day after the 4.0, there was a 1.9. So, there, a couple of earthquakes that definitely were not expecting any kind of seismic activity out in this region. And that light blue area represents, or I'm sorry, I should say like almost like a purple violetish, represents that there was weak shaking that was felt. There was no damage. And then you look in the teal colors near Mentor, Ohio, known for their high school football out there, by the way. There was light shaking that was felt, but again, no damage was reported. So nothing intense as far as, catastrophic, but it does mention that Ohio is on the periphery of the New Madrid seismic zone, an area in the Missouri adjacent states that was the site of the largest earthquake sequence to occur in historical times in the continental United States. 4 great earthquakes were part of a series at a New Madrid in 1811 and 1812. These events were felt throughout the eastern United States and were of sufficient intensity to topple chimneys in Cincinnati. Some estimates suggest that these earthquakes were in the range of the 8.0 on the Richter scale. Wow. So in a year that's been kind of wacky for Ohio so far, we have tornadoes hitting Dayton, and that's just super rare. And then we have a 4.0 earthquake literally in Lake Erie, and that's super rare. And to talk about a possibility of an 8.0 earthquake in the 1811, 1812 region in this area. Now, guys, this only proves my point here when people like John Casey, who wrote the book Upheaval, and his biggest concern is what's going to happen in this New Madrid fault. And when you see articles like this where they're correlating events that happened over 200 years ago, and to be exact, we're talking about 208 years ago. We know what happens every 206 years or so. We are in grand solar minimum type situations. So to see the earthquakes, the rare, weird ones, like we're seeing them right now, is another way of connecting the dots, guys. So we've had a big past 7 days, in my opinion. We've had NASA admit that the next solar cycle, 25, is going to be weakest in the last 200 years, which will show you that we are approaching at the very beginning of the grand solar minimum right now, 2020. That's when it begins. That's when we start to see it kick into real grand solar minimum conditions as it descends. And by the 2030s and by 2040s, well, that's a different story. A whole lot of cold. And there is a significant cycle that was brought to my attention today on Twitter that happens to be every 240 years. And guess what? That's when we see the coldest of the cold weather when we refer to these events on these solar cycles. So I'll have to dig that up and show you guys as well. Again, just another correlation that we're talking about earthquakes that happened back in 1811 that was felt all over the New Madrid, and we're worried about this area because of all of what? Well, that's part of it too. This right here. This is through tomorrow morning in the Ohio Valley, southwestern and eastern Indiana, St. Louis. All this water is putting more pressure on the Mississippi and the New Madrid Fault. So it's like we've started off the year where the floodings were beginning down here. And then, we started getting some bad storms up here and a lot of flooding, and then it went downstream into here. And now we're finally at the Ohio River of the stage of the flooding. So we've had levels of rain and water and flooding being added from the bottom to the top. So it's like we're filling up a cup here. And we're continuing to add more water and more weight and more pressure in this particular region right now. So, to me, this is more than a coincidence that we're seeing this last 3 months of heavy, intense rain, flooding here in Oklahoma, parts of Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, southeastern Kansas, Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota, from snowmelts and bad storms late in the year. Nebraska, you've had your bouts. But now the battle is, now it's in Ohio and Indiana and Illinois, really bad right now. Memphis, Tennessee. So these are areas of concerns when you're talking about pressure on that New Madrid fault line with all this flooding up here. And then you talk about 6 to 8 inches of rain that moves through the Ohio Valley here until tomorrow morning. And there's more rain forecasted after that as well. So buckle up, folks. Deadly floods hit central and western parts of Mongolia. And this has been going on since June 15th, 2019. The floods affected capital and nearby areas such as Lun, Bayangsot, and Baya. Wow. Okay, so there's some provinces here in Mongolia that I cannot pronounce, but there's a lot of areas that are experiencing damage. You guys can look at the article on watchers.news. It's reporting damaging roads and buildings and electric substations. 2 buildings were completely destroyed. According to the National Emergency Management Agency, as many as 12 people have lost their lives, 9 adults and 3 children as of June 17th. Traveling between the capital city and western Mongolian provinces has been restricted for an infinite period. The agency wanted to add here. Meteorological and Environmental Monitoring Agencies said more heavy rain and floods are expected June 17th, that's the day, mostly in central and eastern areas. Residents are advised not to travel to north and south, the capital city of this region. Keep away from rivers. So more flooding, more heavy rain. We've had to deal with Asia recently, a lot of flooding in China, Japan. Strong eruption at Popo. That's all I'm going to say, Popo. Strong eruption took place at Popo in Mexico, 1540 UTC on June 14th. This is a little bit old news, but we wanted to catch up. We haven't been on live since Friday night. 32,000 feet above sea level. Again, we've had a series of explosions from our volcanoes. Popo, Cinnabung, Agung, Merapi. Am I forgetting any, Mario, off the top of my head? Krakatoa. It's funny. We saw someone pronouncing that volcano a different way. And Agung. Mari and I were just talking, though, really, some of these pronunciations like potato and tomato and potato and all that good stuff. So Dynamo. You know, I've heard it's pronounced both ways, but, you know, thanks to our loving critics, we love you guys. We really do. I mean, it's feedback. Gotta love it. But back to this. We've seen a lot of volcanoes going off lately, along with weird earthquakes. We've had 7-point earthquakes in New Zealand. We've had some in Chile. We've had a couple weird ones hit the United States. Nothing catastrophic, but just, you know, weird locations. I do have one to report as well on the Weather Channel. They have a Chinese earthquake, 5.8. But where I'm going with this is I was watching a video tonight, a documentary on the weather.com, and talking about scenarios that could wipe out, you know, planet Earth. And it really was an in-depth documentary of the birth of Earth and where it came from and how many years ago, and then all the possibilities of how it can end. And I'll tell you something right now, folks. This speaks huge volumes to me. The Weather Channel had ruled out man-made global warming. It was not mentioned as part of a catastrophic event. It was not mentioned as a worry or an alert or an awareness or a warning or anything. But the one thing that they do believe has a better shot at wiping out mankind than man-made global warming is a rogue planet, believe it or not. Now, the odds are super microscopic small, but I found amusement that the Weather Channel would show a documentary that excluded man-made global warming from the possibilities of the destruction of Earth, but yet did list the very, 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 very tiny possibility of a rogue planet actually slingshotting around our sun. So I found that interesting, but a lot of truth coming out right now in the mainstream media in certain things. NASA disclosing the next solar cycle being weaker, not the same strength or a little bit stronger, but actually way weaker. The weakest we've seen in the last 200 years. That to me is an indication and a red flag, an obvious innuendo. Hey, read between the lines. 200 years ago was a Dalton minimum. And we're not saying that this is saying we're going to have a Dalton-like minimum. I'm just pointing out merely that NASA has confirmed that this will be the weakest cycle in the last 200 years. And when they made the same prediction right before 24, at the same time they're making 25 prediction, it was pretty dead smack on. But interesting to see all the disclosure, and even Weather Channel, one of their possibilities of mankind being wiped out, this is a little scary to me. But they mention the possibility of the event of many volcanoes erupting, causing global cooling, and wiping out crops, creating famine. A lot of truth in that documentary. And it was actually kind of high on the list of odds of actually happening. They mentioned that way before the rogue planet. They mentioned it way before all these other possibilities from thousands of light years away. A gamma ray burst, and there was a couple other things that were mentioned as well, black hole. But the global cooling was pretty high up on the list of odds of things that are actually possible. And again, I feel like with NASA's little nonchalant leak and Weather Channel, which I've always watched programs on weather.com and Weather Channel, and they're always talking about man-made climate change. They're always talking about how man has affected climate. And this may be the beginning of acceptance of the science that people like us. I'm not saying we're responsible for it, but we're part of that group of people who believe in the science and the research that is being presented to us. Is the Weather Channel trying to change silently the dialogue here? Just today, Mari tweeted some things out on our Grand Solar Minimum account. Jim Cantori actually liked it. And it was actually the article I think we're going to share tonight about Arctic and Antarctic glaciers have not really melted over time. And Cantori liked it. He gave us some love there. Now, again, there has been some things here in the last 2 to 3 weeks that have happened that we believe is starting to unveil the truth. And people aren't stupid. People are talking about this weather all over the world right now. Not just here in the United States, but all over the world. People are complaining in the UK about the cold and the rain over and over again. My Lord, David, the TSM Solar Observations, shared a chart on June the 25th, a weather or temperature anomaly map. And the UK is in the purple, several degrees below what it's supposed to be for that time of year. June 25th, like 10, 15, 20 degrees below. So this is getting traction worldwide, not just regional anymore. And I know I've always said on this channel that GSM has regional effects, and it does, because there's some areas that are still going to get really hot, and there's some areas that are going to get really cold, and we're still going to see drought. There are certain parts of the world that actually heat up during these grand solar minimums. I know we've talked a lot about in Alaska. We've seen a lot of warming in Alaska during grand solar minimum periods. So for someone to come out and say, oh, that's, GSM's not happening because it got really hot the other day in Australia, 4 months ago when it was in the middle of summer. Well, yeah, it's in the middle of the summer in Australia. How do you explain, if you want to say global warming's in effect, then how do you explain where we had the snow flurries in Queensland and New South Wales? How do you explain that? That's a tropical-like climate. But look, I've heard it all. I've heard it where people say that our channel piques interest in January when it's cold and snowy out. And I'll tell you something right now. This channel, right now, as of June 17th, the middle of almost in summertime, this channel has gained more subscriptions, more comments, more views. More people are engaging and asking real questions about this. We're being contacted by farmers all over the United States. This is the most serious I've ever seen the concern from our viewers, and it's growing. And we're not talking about snow. We're not talking about cold right now. It is cooler, but to think that a channel like this only thrives during the winter months is absolutely grossly wrong, especially when we're talking about crops, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Moving right along here, severe storms hits the Azores. The Azores, I'm sorry. I know some people get upset about that one. Low pressure area moved over the Azores on June 16th, 2019, dropping heavy rain on the Portuguese area, causing major floods. The head of civil protection of the Azores, Carlos Neves, said the islands took heavy damage due to bad weather, with the island of Terceira the most affected. Most of the damage occurred. Storm uprooted trees, flooded roads and homes, and caused evacuations. Portugal. Again, some of these videos look like the same. This is actually the video that I saw on weather.com today, Weather Channel, watching there. And that's the actual channel that brought me to the attention about the flooding that happened here. Forgive the bad footage here. But I was super impressed that weather.com was showing not just flooding pictures from the United States, but they were sharing flooding from all over the world today too. And it's starting to make me wonder a little bit if the mainstream is starting to shift a little bit with what's going on, how it's happening. They're never going to come out and just blatantly say this. A lot of money is going to be lost. A lot of grants will be lost if that happens. But again, I was aware of this event today through weather.com. Sorry, watchers.news. You're always my number one go-to. And that's why I use your link tonight. But check out these raging floodwaters here, guys. And this was yesterday, the 16th. Finally, 5.8 earthquake, at least 6 dead, dozens injured after a 5.8 earthquake affects southern China. This is from weather.com. The earthquake hit the Sichuan province. There were also reports of damage to buildings. At least 6 people were killed and dozens after a 5.8 earthquake shook southern China's...
There are 3 words that mean everything when you live with me.
Thank you. All right, where were we here? The U.S. Geological Survey had warned there could be casualties and extensive damage from the strong quake. The agency also warned that past quakes in the area have caused landslides. Earlier in the day, before the casualties were known, see right here, posted a video on Twitter that showed broken glass in a building from the earthquake. Pretty powerful for a 5.8, lots of damage there. The USGS said that the quake measured magnitude of 5.8, hitting about 12 miles from the city of Chang'an in Sichuan. The quake was centered at a fairly shallow depth of 6 miles. It says the student here that was quoted said that they felt the shake last for 1 to 3 seconds. It was a violent 2 rocks sideways. She was facing the balcony so she could see our flat moving relatively with those adjacent. They ran out of the building to emergency door after the shaking and waited for aftershocks to pass. Hopefully it's going to be a calm night. And here's just some pictures of some of the minor building damage here from this earthquake. But again, we have seen lots of things. China dealing with floodwaters, earthquakes, all kinds of things all over the world happening in more than just one area of the planet. It's not regional anymore. The effects so far appear to be global at this point. I mean, a couple years ago, we could easily say this is definitely just a regional situation, but I think that time is done and went. Guys, stick around. We'll be right back.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.